In 2019, Australia launched a project that could well trigger an energy revolution. Maybe not across the whole country, but definitely in the southeastern region. This involves thousands of workers, loads of expensive equipment, including as many as 3 tunnel boring machines, which are needed to create miles of underground pathways. What other way is there to show just how massive this project is? To make it happen, the Australians are using a huge amount of water, which they've managed to store right in the mountains. When it's finally done, Australia's going to get so many benefits, or rather, if they finish it, because this project is facing a ton of issues. There's so many problems that the total cost has skyrocketed from just a couple of $1 billion to almost $20 billion. So what's happening over there in Australia? Let's dig into it. The Australian project we're talking about here is part of something much bigger, called the Snowy Mountain Scheme, or Snowy 1.0. Here's what it's all about. No, we won't be looking for one specific spot on this map, because there are tons of them, and each one is part of a massive project. It includes 16 major dams, 9 power plants, 2 pumping stations, and 140 miles of tunnels, pipelines, and aqueducts. Basically, it's no surprise they call it one of the modern wonders of civil engineering. As you can tell from all of the above, the Snowy Mountain Scheme is all about water, redirecting massive amounts of water from one place to another. There's a river in the southeast of the country called the Snowy, which starts in the Australian Alps. Yep, Australia has its own Alps, and they look a lot like the ones in Europe. And yes, there's a reason we're pointing that out, because the river doesn't really have any other standout features. It starts in the mountains, thanks to all the melting snow, flows for 219 miles, and then just vanishes into the sea, just like that. In the middle of the last century, Australia's population started growing fast, and it needed water for farming and other uses. Meanwhile, 2 rivers, the Murray and the Murrumbidgee, were already being heavily used, giving people all the water they could. So the country decided that it wasn't enough for the Snowy River to just flow into the sea, it needed to work for Australia's benefit. And that's how the Snowy Mountain Scheme came to be. Miles of pipelines and dams were built to redirect water into the basins of rivers that were already being used. To be specific, after the construction, Australians started diverting 555 billion gallons of water per year from the Snowy River to support the country's irrigated agriculture. When it comes to dams, they don't just stop the flow of rivers, forming reservoirs to channel the liquid resource. They're also equipped with hydroelectric power stations. How could we do without them in today's world? As part of the project, 9 of them were built with a combined capacity of about 4 gigawatt hours. The largest one is Tumut. Actually, it's a series of facilities, and the most powerful one among them is Tumut 3. See all those pipes running from one reservoir to another? We'll get into why they build stuff like this later, but for now, let's just say it's kind of like an upgraded hydroelectric power station that uses water to generate electricity. A more conventional example is the Murray 1 hydroelectric plant. It has a capacity of 950 megawatts and produces 1,413 gigawatt hours of energy annually, which is enough to supply over 95,000 homes. Everything generated by the project is renewable energy, which the country's been striving for and continues to strive for right now. In fact, the Snowy Mountain Scheme, or Snowy 1.0, is the largest producer of green energy in all of Australia. Thanks to all its dams and hydroelectric plants, it generates 67% of that kind of electricity. The 555 billion gallons of water from the Snowy River that the Australians sent in the direction they needed provide extra water for irrigated farming worth about 3 billion Australian dollars a year. That's more than 40% of the gross value of the country's agricultural output. The benefits are obvious, even to the naked eye. They're even more obvious if you know the cost of the entire project. In 1974, it was 820 million Australian dollars, which would be about $2 billion today. Still a lot less than many projects that provide less benefit. However, all these benefits turned out to be not enough, and Snowy 1.0 is now being supplemented with another project, which is much smaller in scale, but has a much higher cost due to the massive number of problems it faces. But let's take it one thing at a time. All parts of the Snowy Mountains project have been completed, and the country started reaping all the benefits in the form of water and renewable energy. Of course, no one planned to stop at just hydroelectric power from the project. more green energy was needed, so the area started to expand with a massive amount of farms generating additional renewable energy from the sun and wind. For example, in 2018, the company Snowy Hydro, which manages everything in the Snowy Mountain scheme, signed 8 contracts for construction, 4 of which are solar power plants and another 4 are wind farms. The total output of all the plants is 2.8 terawatt hours of energy per year, enough to power 500,000 households. However, solar and wind power plants are unreliable solutions for providing electricity. There could be a situation when there's no sun or wind, but a lot of electricity is needed at that moment. In another case, electricity could be generated at times when it's not really needed, causing waste. This is something Snowy Hydro and the Australian government wanted to deal with. As a result, in 2019, construction of a new solution began, a pumped storage hydroelectric station, or PSH. If you've wondered why the Snowy Mountain scheme is also called Snowy 1.0 and where the next Snowy projects are, well, here's the project called Snowy 2.0. It should be said here that Australians really got lucky in that they've already flooded the mountains with massive amounts of water, blocking rivers with dams during a previous project. 2 giant reservoirs were created, Talbingo, which holds 243 billion gallons of water, and Tantangara, a body of water that holds 67 billion gallons. Another key point is that the elevation difference between the reservoirs is a full 2,300 feet. So, according to the plan, the lakes are set to be connected by an inclined pressure shaft, or just a tunnel, which, by the way, will be the largest of its kind. Its diameter will be 33 feet, its length 1 mile, and the slope 25 degrees. Somewhere between the tanks, there'll be a room 72 feet wide, 164 feet high, and 820 feet long. Inside, 6 reversible Francis turbines with a capacity of 333 megawatts each will be installed. How will this work and help protect from the instability of green energy? When there's an excess of energy produced for the grid, pumps transfer water from the lower reservoir to the upper one. And when there's not enough energy in the grid to meet the demand, the pumped storage hydroelectric system starts releasing water down, generating electricity. So it's like a huge battery that charges when needed and gives back energy. When it comes to numbers during water discharge, Snowy 2.0 will have about 2.2 gigawatts of power. And when it comes to energy storage, the pumped hydro storage system will be able to hold 350,000 megawatt hours for use during times when solar panels, wind turbines, and gas stations aren't producing enough. These figures, by the way, can largely be achieved thanks to the previous project, Snowy 1.0, during which the selected reservoirs were already formed. And also because there's that big 2,300-foot height difference between the lakes, as we mentioned earlier. The project's been under construction since 2019, meaning it's been 6 years already. And if the pumped hydro energy storage is finally completed, Australia will get both a huge storage facility and a generator capable of providing 10% of the country's energy. Why, if it's completed instead of when? Because the Snowy 2.0 project is facing a lot of problems. To give you an idea of how serious this is, the Snowy Hydro project was originally supposed to be finished by 2024. Now they're planning to officially announce the start of energy production at the end of 2027, with full operation of the pumped storage hydroelectric plant expected in 2028. But even then, it's hard to say for sure. Ideas about building such a pumped storage hydroelectric plant in this same location were discussed back in 1966. Then studies were conducted in 1980 and 1990. Right before the construction began, additional research was done, and it turned out that the project could indeed be carried out. They even estimated the cost range right away, from 3.8 to 4.5 billion Australian dollars. And here we need to go back to Snowy 1.0 for a minute. The project cost didn't even reach $2 billion, but it turned out to be really useful. Project's a big deal, many gigawatts of power, thousands of megawatts of capacity, and it also helps to prevent instability in renewable energy. As for Snowy 2.0, the high cost is partly justified by the fact that Snowy Hydro planned to use 3 tunnel boring machines in the process: Lady Eileen Hudson, Florence, and Kirsten. And let's be honest, that's a pretty expensive endeavor. On top of that, they had to build a factory that makes the segments for the tunnels right on site. In general, all the preliminary work was completed. After that, the tunneling machine, Lady Eileen Hudson, had completed a 1.77-mile diversion tunnel from Lake Talbingo, the lower reservoir of the pumped storage hydropower plant, to the equipment room that'll generate power and pump water by October 2022. Other tunnels were also dug for engineering services. In March of that same year, the builders started laying the main tunnel that runs from the underground power station to the second lake and upper reservoir of Snowy 2.0, Tantangara. Another survey was done, including a test drilling. According to people who worked on the project, the drill hit soft ground and then hundreds of gallons of water poured out. The situation's pretty standard for this kind of work. They need to do additional scouting, and if something's off, they reroute the path somewhere else. Yeah, it'll take more time and money, and that's probably the deciding factor. Because in March 2022, the Florence tunnel boring machine weighing 2,400 tons was ready to start digging the tunnel, along the very same route that was originally planned where soft soil had been found. And the hole they made during the survey, well, they just sealed it up. The huge Florence was moving underground for a while, not encountering any obstacles. Everything was going as planned. However, it eventually got stuck in that very soft soil. Snowy Hydro initially claimed that Florence is one of the most advanced machines in the world, and that's no surprise. Its cost reaches $150 million, so it's not just a tunnel boring machine, but a real factory. In particular, one of the features of such a factory was the ability to use a sludge delivery system, which helps strengthen the soil ahead. So Florence will drill and then float through the thick soil layer. It's capable of anything. However, as it turned out, the advanced system not only didn't work, its key equipment was simply missing. What did it lead to? Florence didn't stop completely, but kept moving. However, as workers claim, for the whole next week, they had to clear dirt around the tunnel boring machine every 20 inches, and water, which at times reached more than 3 feet. Just to give you an idea, technically, Florence's speed is 100 to 165 feet per day. One of the contractors who did the drilling claimed that Florence is working fine. Then news came out that the tunnel boring machine had problems again. After drilling through the soft layer, the ground above Florence just collapsed. In December 2022, a sinkhole 230 feet deep appeared. But there was good news, as reported by the CEO of Snowy Hydro. The main contract price stayed at $5.9 billion. Oh, we forgot to mention that the amount had already reached a figure well above the previously announced cap of $4.5 billion. Do you know what's the weirdest thing in this situation? The hole appeared only 500 feet from where Florence started working. Drilling began in March, and the machine only reached this point in December. And keep in mind, they have to drill a 9.3-mile tunnel. There were attempts to stabilize the ground around Florence, but the problem came up here as well. Workers said that one night, steam appeared near the machine. They were told it was water vapor, but later it turned out it was isocyanate, and it's dangerous. So much so that under certain conditions, it can even be deadly. The work stopped again, which of course raised the project costs once more. When it seemed like Florence would never drill the tunnel under any circumstances, a miracle happened. By the beginning of December 2023, it was reported that the machine was moving at a speed of 20 feet per day. The machine was drilling until May 2024. And then what do you think happened? A solid ground got in the way, and Florence got stuck once again. Unlike previous situations, this time Snowy Hydro officials officially confirmed that there was a problem, and it was a serious one, meaning normal drilling should have resumed in weeks or even months. That's exactly what happened. Florence was only cleared of solid rock by ultra-high-pressure water blasting by July 11th, and then it resumed its work. However, the project participants had already figured out that something was going wrong. In August, there was news that Snowy Hydro was considering allocating an additional $75 million for another tunnel boring machine. By the way, the project cost at that point had already passed $12 billion. The latest updates from early January 2025 say that 2,800 feet of tunnel have been completed. I think it's clear that problems didn't stop. And you know the project has issues, not just with digging the main tunnel. Some say the location for Snowy 2.0 was poorly chosen. This troublesome project is being carried out right here. There's the Tantangara Lake, and here's the Talbingo Reservoir. Where are the nearest major energy consumers? Melbourne, a city with 5.2 million people as of 2023, is about 236 miles from Snowy 2.0. Sydney, with nearly 5.3 million residents as of 2022, is over 155 miles away. The only major energy consumer somewhat nearby is Canberra. the capital of Australia, with a population of around 450,000 people, located about 31 miles away. But they don't see it as a problem because apparently the plan is to supply power not to large centers, but to more energy-scarce areas. The government's already approved the HumeLink project, a 227-mile high-voltage transmission line system that'll connect Wagga Wagga, Barnaby, and Mooragle. So what's the project cost? It'll be $4.8 billion, and the total cost of Snowy 2.0 will reach almost $17 billion. Another issue is that the project's being carried out not just anywhere, but in Kosciuszko National Park. The highest point of mainland Australia, Mount Kosciuszko, sits on an area of 2,664 square miles, and the park was named after it. The highest town in Australia, Cabramurra, is located there as well. What's most important right now is that the park spans various climate zones, each with its own set of ecosystems. It's home to many rare or endangered species of animals, like one of Australia's most vulnerable species, the Corroboree frog, the endangered mountain pygmy possum, and the more common dusky antechinus. There are also brumbies, wild horses. Naturally, the local rivers are also home to both rare and not-so-rare inhabitants. The flora here is made up of typical representatives of alpine forests. As you remember, the Australians have their own Alps. To the south, there are acacia forests as well as many other trees. There's now a project here that clearly isn't helping improve the conditions in the park, and it's being constantly criticized for it. For example, at one point a dead fish was found and algae started spreading near the Tantangara Dam, which forms the reservoir of the same name. In June 2022, the progress of the project led to the formation of a trail of sediment that stretched for more than 1.2 miles down the Yarangobilly River, and by September, the polluted water reached Nungar Creek. In December 2023, it was found that the groundwater had been contaminated due to blasting operations. Fines were the only consequences after all these problems were discovered. You know how much they were? Snowy Hydro paid $15,000, and one of the contractors paid the same. $30,000 for a project worth $17 billion. It's a drop in the ocean. The one good thing is that Snowy 2.0 will give Australia plenty of power once it's finished. But will that actually happen? That's the big question.